best, Jerry. The best.
Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Jason Wright Show, Best of the Web series. All right, so the Best of the Web is where I go through and find these cool little nuggets throughout the week. Either people forward them to me, I happen to come across them in my Instagram feed or my shorts feed on YouTube, whatever. But they're kind of just these little bite-sized nuggets of goodness that are just sitting out there, because I firmly believe that we live in a time where there is an absolute infinite amount of knowledge that has incredible utility value. But if it's just sitting out there and we're not using it, then what's it for? Also, I tend to think that social media and the web and all the digital assets we have as far as content creation that's out there gets kind of a bad rap because of all the garbage that's out there. But there's actually some really good things out there. And I'm a firm believer in self-education. And there has never been a better time for you and I to truly make ourselves less ignorant to the world around us in a whole host of different subjects and topics. So with the mindset that the Jason Wright Show, the motto here is to improve always and always, what the Best of the Web series is, these are, and by the way, this is not some series where I'm going to go out and I'm going to go find where somebody crushed somebody else or annihilates them in a debate, or it's somebody insulting another party or something like that. That's not what the Best of the Web is. This is truly a little place for you to stop by and just grab some little nuggets that either, one, you may have seen them before, and it's a nice reminder of, oh yeah, I forgot I haven't seen that video in forever, and that's a cool little tidbit that I can store away in my toolkit. Or maybe you're seeing it for the first time, and I hope you take it and you share it with everybody. Say, hey, this will give you hope. Hey, this is something that will help you understand this topic better. So that's what the Best of the Web is all about. And I'm going to start with a little video from Milton Friedman, where he talks about the pencil. And what this is basically distribution of labor. And I think it's so important. You know, whenever I was in business school, one of the things that occurred to me was when we took economics, both macro and micro, I was really shocked at why more people didn't focus on economics versus politics. Right now, we live in a very divided country. You know that, I know that. Don't have to belabor that point. But I think if we could all at least get together and look at and understand economic principles. They're pretty black and white. They're easy to get your mind around. They're easy to illustrate. And one of the things that Milton Friedman does that I think is really cool in this little video is he actually does an excellent job of describing exactly how the distribution of labor works. And also for those who are more Marxist in nature, they look at that economic theory and they think that's how we should go, or Keynesian or whatever. I think that if you see a video like this, you can kind of start to understand why distribution of labor and capitalism is so powerful and why it works and how it employs so many people. Because you hear this all the time. You hear the politicians say capitalism has brought more people out of poverty than any other economic system ever known to man. Well, how? Why? Well, the simple fact is it puts more people to work. It does a better job of causing people to cooperate, meaning work together. People that have never met, never will meet, working together toward a ultimate common goal. And in this case, to make a pencil. So without further ado, let's get the Best of the Web started with a little bit of economic theory from none other than Milton Friedman. All right, let's do this.
The basic principles underlying the free market, as Adam Smith taught them to his students in this university, are really very simple. Look at this lead pencil. There's not a single person in the world who could make this pencil. Remarkable statement? Not at all. The wood from which it's made, for all I know, comes from a tree that was cut down in the state of Washington. Cut down that tree, it took a saw. To make the saw, it took steel. To make the steel, it took iron ore. This black center, we call it lead, but it's really graphite, compressed graphite. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I think it comes from some mines in South America. This red top up here, the eraser, bit of rubber, probably comes from Malaya, where the rubber tree isn't even native. It was imported from South America by some businessmen with the help of the British government. This brass ferrule, I haven't the slightest idea where it came from, or the yellow paint, or the paint that made the black lines, or the glue that holds it together. Literally thousands of people cooperated to make this pencil. People who don't speak the same language, who practice different religions, who might hate one another if they ever met. When you go down to the store and buy this pencil, you are in effect trading a few minutes of your time for a few seconds of the time of all those thousands of people. What brought them together and induced them to cooperate to make this pencil? There was no commissar sending out orders from some central office. It was the magic of the price system, the impersonal operation of prices that brought them together and got them to cooperate to make this pencil so that you could have it for a trifling sum. That is why the operation of the free market is so essential, not only to promote productive efficiency, but even more, to foster harmony and peace among the peoples of the world.
And there you have it. To me,
Yes.
that is such a powerful statement on economics. And it's one that I don't think a lot of people have ever heard or understand. And again, no political agenda here. Just I think it's really good for us to understand how basic economics work and how the free market system works. I once heard someone describe that the beauty of the free market is this, like as it relates to race relations and that sort of thing. Ask yourself the question, when you go to the grocery store and you buy a dozen eggs or a gallon of milk, do you care what color the dairyman was or the farmer was that ended up, that grew the chickens, that milked the cows, or the truck driver that drove the products to the grocery store? You don't care. The free market system is blind to all the inequities that face us in a lot of other areas of life. So this just goes to show you, like Milton Friedman said, it's one way that a lot of people that were they to meet in person, they might actually hate each other. But for this instance, as it relates to the free market, they will all cooperate to try to reach an ultimate goal. So there is your first little best of the web tidbit for the day on economics. Now let's move into some health and wellness. So something that's been talked about a lot in the health and wellness space, as most of you know, that is something I actually own a business in the health and wellness space, Authentic Health Partners. And I am steeped in trying to understand better nutrition and the things that are really going to impact longevity, health and wellness, and health span as I get older, as well as for our clients and customers that shop and with Authentic Health. And so one of the things that I've really dialed in on of late is protein synthesis and all the different forms of protein that I can get in and their importance. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's kind of a trend reversal in intermittent fasting at the moment. There was an article that came out I think it started on NBC Online, or maybe it was just a news report that went viral about intermittent fasting increasing the likelihood of heart disease. There were some flaws with the data. I think that Mike Mutzel at High Intensity Health, check out his channel, fantastic content. Mike's an awesome dude. I think he really took it to task. Also, though, Lane Norton, who, if you know anything about Lane Norton, BioLane, again, check out his channel, check out his work. Remarkable. These are people that I trust. Whenever something like this happens, where you've got this big controversial topic like, oh my gosh, intermittent fasting, which has been so popular for so long now, all of a sudden people are starting to speak against it, and now they're saying that it could actually lead to heart disease. I want to go to these experts to see what they're saying. Lane basically said the jury's still out. He did question some of the data, and if you know anything about Lane Norton, here's what he is absolutely genius at doing. He will take a report and he will dissect it and let you and I, the lay people out there trying to figure this out, know here's how the study was conducted. Here are the flaws with the study. What they did is they cherry picked some data, they made a headline out of it, and they used it for clickbait. And then he will just go after them. And so that's why I like looking at Lane's work. Well, one of the things that I think has been a knock on fasting, and this is one of the things that Peter Attia has brought up before, is that just by the very nature of intermittent fasting, which, by the way, I'm not saying I'm for or against. I use intermittent fasting still to this day. I have cut back some. I used to intermittent fast every single day. I would have an 8-16 feeding window, so I would only have an 8-hour feeding window. I'd fast for 16 hours. now what I do is I make sure on Mondays, because I'm going to kind of let loose a little bit on my diet on the weekends, just because Jimlin and I are going out a little bit more. I'm just more relaxed. And so on Mondays, I try to do intermittent fasting just I like fast till 1 or 2 in the afternoon, stop eating on Sunday nights, hopefully by 7:30. So it's usually going to be between a 16 and a 20-hour fast. I just do it to kind of clean up my system, just because I think mentally it just helps me. So I'm not saying I don't intermittent fast and I'm against it, but one of the things that Peter Attia has brought up, as well as Dr. Rhonda Patrick, who has kind of started to question the benefits of intermittent fasting, is the fact that just by its very nature, you're eating less calories. And when you're eating less calories, it makes it even harder for us to get the right amount of protein intake. One of the things as I get older and the more research that comes in, I realize I need protein as I age. I'm 49 years old, and protein synthesis and getting lean body mass is of absolute paramount importance. Everyone from Dr. Michael Eads, who's been on the podcast, to Dr. Gus Vickery, my business partner and also the co-host of the Authentic Health podcast with me, he has said, you've got to get the right amount of protein. And those of you who have tried this, you know it's hard, especially when you're trying to get 2 grams of protein, which Peter Attia actually recommends to his patients, 2 grams of protein per kilogram of weight. That's a lot of protein. When you start measuring out and you look at all the stuff you have to eat, it's really challenging to get that and intermittent fast, and then also have what Lane Norton subscribes to, a really disciplined macronutrient diet. So all that said, I wanted to at least bring something to the table on this Best of the Web day to talk a little bit about the importance of protein. And I went to Dr. Rhonda Patrick, because Dr. Patrick has done, and by the way, she's at Found My Fitness, has a great YouTube channel, podcast, and a newsletter you can subscribe to that's free. I'm pretty sure she has a paywall you can go behind, but just her basic newsletter, it's awesome. All of Rhonda Patrick's content is fantastic. She's a great researcher. Love her work. So I found this video where she was explaining to Shane Parrish, also the Knowledge Project, I think is his podcast. Fantastic. It's on my playlist. I subscribe to it. Highly recommend Shane's podcast. And look, I'm trying to give credit where credit's due. I know that all these videos that are out on the interwebs get repurposed, and I'll do my best to credit them in the show notes and on the screens. But I also want to make sure that I am giving credit where credit is due. If I'm bringing you something from the Best of the Web, a lot of times I'm going straight to these experts that I trust and look to. I just want to make sure that I do the proper crediting for that. So anyway, let's learn a little bit about the importance of protein intake. Also, before I even get to that, one of the things that I, as a guy, again, that makes part of his living in the health and wellness space, did not know up until about a year ago or so from my business partner, Gus Vickery, and my precision care physician, my personal physician, is that essential amino acids are one of the key ingredients to making sure you maintain good protein intake, protein synthesis. And here's the cool thing about it. So Gus, and I'll actually put a link to this, Gus has developed an entire body composition protocol where you can actually change the composition of your body. And what it is going to require is some heavy calorie restriction. The bottom line is you just can't truly change your body without burning more calories than you bring in. Well, when that happens, you're going to lack some nutrients that your body needs. And one of the first things that you're going to find yourself in a deficit of is protein. When you start to really reduce those calories, it's one of the things that, like the semaglutides that people are taking, like Ozempic, one of the biggest things about that, and Gus and I did an entire episode early on when Ozempic started becoming all the rage, was we did an episode to talk about, okay, if you're going to use semaglutide as part of your weight loss strategy, understand what you're doing to your body. You are about to starve your body of necessary nutrients when you use these peptides. And so you've got to make up for it somehow. One of the best ways to make up for the lack of protein is essential amino acids, because essential amino acids will actually give you the protein synthesis without any caloric intake. It's amazing. So you get the protein you need without having to eat and consume the calories, and it's absolutely necessary. So that was something that I just recently learned. So there you go. You're welcome. So anyway, this is Dr. Rhonda Patrick talking about the need for protein. So let's do this.
So, I was sitting here talking about all these micronutrients, and it was like vegetables was a big thing we were talking about, right? But we also hit on omega-3s, and that was fish. Protein, right? So fish is a source of protein. Protein is, amino acids are something that we need to get from our diet every day. And, we, much like we store glucose as glycogen in our liver and our muscles, we store fat like triglycerides, right? Adipose tissue. We don't really store amino acids, although our skeletal muscle is kind of a reservoir for them. And during periods of fasting or low protein intake, we pull from our muscle to get amino acids because they're essential to survive. And what does that mean? That means you're pulling important protein from your muscle, and that does cause muscle atrophy. So you want to avoid that, right? And so in order to help avoid that, all these, regulatory committees had come up with, let's figure out how much protein people need to take in every single day to avoid those losses, right? You don't want to be pulling it from your muscle. You want to replenish everything that you're losing every day. And so studies were done many, many years ago, and that number came up to be 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is what was the recommended daily allowance for protein intake. Fast forward decades, you've got all this new science and new technology that's come out and new ways of measuring things. And, any scientist will tell you that your data is only as sensitive as, the tools that you're using. Okay. And so, data from experts like Dr. Stuart Phillips and others, they started to, look into how you measure protein losses and amino acid losses. And turns out that those studies that were done decades ago were using tools that they were basically underestimating the losses of amino acids. So it turns out using new techniques that are more sensitive, that in order to just prevent your body from like pulling from, your skeletal muscle to get amino acids, the minimum amount of protein you need to take in is actually 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight, which is higher than the 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight, right? So, and that's just, to the bare minimum, like the minimum amount you need to prevent, to prevent your body from pulling from muscle.
Remember, I said Peter Attia said 2.
And they also did some studies looking at, well, what if you're physically active, right? You're causing damage to your muscle, you're using a lot of energy. Lots of things going on. That number goes up to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. And this was a big eye-opener for me a couple of years ago when I talked to Dr. Phillips and started looking and reading his research, because I always thought people were getting enough protein. I thought, oh, well, people are getting enough. And turns out a lot of people are not getting enough protein because they're not getting at least that 1.2 grams per kilogram, body weight bare minimum. And so that, I think, is you have to think about, okay, well, where do I get my protein? Animal meat's probably one of the best sources because essential amino acids are very highly concentrated in poultry and meat and fish. If you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you just have to really work really hard and supplement with protein powders and stuff to kind of get that amino acid composition up.
Is all sort of like animal protein the same? Like, I would imagine you need the complete set of sort of amino acids for it to be the most bioavailable in your body. I don't know what I'm talking about here, obviously. But is there like a big difference between steak and chicken and sort of other sources of protein that we typically think of?
There are differences with respect to their micronutrient profiles in general. Like steak has a lot more iron, for example. There's a lot of zinc in like shellfish, like oysters. So, but with respect to just the essential amino acids, like getting them from any of those sources, like fleshy sources, meat, poultry, fish is pretty good with respect to like protein. You will find that they'll like per ounce of, food that you're eating, maybe there's like a little bit more in like denser in meat than fish or something like that. But Yeah, there are subtle differences between them, but also just in the whole micronutrient profile itself, right? So like some of them have more zinc, some of them have more, iron, some of them have more B12. So things like that also. And then fish have the omega-3 much more than steak. So generally speaking, there's a big difference in their like micronutrient composition, generally speaking. But with respect to the essential amino acids, like if you're really trying to hit that 1.2 to 1.6 grams a day 1.6 grams per kilogram body weight. Obviously, that's very important.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of protein. It actually is really a lot of protein, especially for people that are physically active. And you might be going, well, why is that so important? Well, like, so if you are constantly pulling amino acids from your muscle, it's like pulling from your retirement fund early, right? Like, because when you, so our muscle mass peak is probably, I would say, anywhere between 20 to 30 years old is when we're like peak muscle mass. After 30, as you get into 40, you start going down. And then, you get to 50, even more. So you start to, it gets harder.
That's why exercise is so important as you age.
So
right?
important.
To maintain your,
I mean, there's lots of reasons we can talk about aerobic exercise versus, resistance training. But resistance training is the other way to stimulate like skeletal muscle protein synthesis and increase muscle mass, but also muscle strength. Both of those decline with age. And you want to try to build up that muscle mass reservoir earlier in life, kind of like you do what your retirement fund, right? Like you want to build it up because you're going to be pulling from it no matter what. Even if you're working out later in life, you're still going to be pulling from it because you just lose more muscle mass and strength as you age. It's just part of the aging process. And so the more you can kind of counter that with resistance training, with making sure you're getting enough protein, then the better off you're going to be. But, it's like, if you didn't do it earlier in life, it's never too late. Like that's something also to like keep in mind. Like don't give up. Like, oh, I'm already 50. It's too late for me. No, because like you can get gains in muscle mass and really actually great gains in strength, particularly with resistance training. Protein intake is one easy thing. Like a lot of people, like like our parents, like, so, not everyone's exercising, right? They're not doing resistance training. And so get that protein intake becomes even more important at that point. And something also that you might find interesting, Shane, is that we're talking about omega-3s. So there's some work from Chris McGlory. He was at McMaster. He's in Canada. Gosh, what university is he at now? I forgot. Like it slipped my mind. But he did training at McMaster and with Stu Phillips, and he had basically done some research that have found high dose omega-3s could prevent disuse atrophy. So like when people are older, they're not using their muscles a lot, and when you're not using your muscles a lot, and you're certainly not getting enough protein, you start to atrophy even more, right? But if you gave them a high dose omega-3, so this was like 4 grams a day, 4 to 5 grams a day, it totally prevented disuse atrophy. And this was they did the study in younger adults and younger females, but it was like 50% less. And Dr. McGlory has looked into a lot of other, he's done some other studies and mechanism and looking into it. And he thinks that what's happening is omega-3s are sensitizing your skeletal muscle to amino acids. In other words, it's you're getting more amino acids into you're getting more bang for your buck. So more amino acids are getting in when you have the omega-3s there, because omega-3s are really important for the skeletal muscle like membrane and stuff, and so it might be easier just to get the nutrients in.
So there you have it. Rhonda Patrick, genius. Shane Parrish, unbelievable podcast. And by the way, if someone knows Rhonda Patrick, Rhonda, I would love to have you on my podcast. I'd love to just geek out on things like HIIT training, which I know is kind of her wheelhouse. That is her weapon of choice for cardio, for working on VO2 max. There's a great conversation between Dr. Rhonda Patrick and Dr. Peter Attia on her podcast, Found My Fitness, in which they discuss a lot of different topics. Dr. Attia goes through his entire training regimen, and they talk about the differences in their approach to VO2 max training. Fantastic. You should check that out. So next, I want to bring up just kind of just call this self-serving, but I had a great conversation with Hugh Massie. Hugh Massie is the founder of DNA Behavior International. This is an incredible conversation. I know you'll love it, but I want to bring this one piece to you because it kind of gives you an understanding for people like me. I'm just going to point the finger at myself. I am someone, and I've talked about it on the podcast many times, that I have suffered from a fixed mindset for a great deal of my life. What do I mean by that? I know fixed versus growth. Dr. Carol Dweck's work has been commented on and cited over and over and over. So you probably already know what I mean, but here is just kind of the down and dirty definition of terms for fixed versus growth. So fixed growth or fixed mindset people like myself believe you're either born smart or you're not. You're either born with athletic ability or you're not. Whatever you are is what you are, and you just have to figure out a way to make what you have work, as opposed to being able to actually go beyond what your natural giftings are. The person with the growth mindset says, I may not be as intellectually, not superior, but I might not have the intellect that I want yet, but I can get there. I can always improve no matter what I have as a natural gifting. I can always improve upon that. Well, I've been someone who's had a fixed mindset for years and years, and I have, tried to overcome that as years have gone on, and that it's something I'm constantly working on. Well, Hugh Massie, he talks about, and I even bring it up in the conversation, he talks about kind of an epigenetic approach to our behaviors. You and I, we are born from a DNA perspective with certain behaviors that are going to express themselves in how we tackle problems, how we manage money, how we manage our exercise, our diet. A lot of our behaviors that you and I possess, they are traced back to our DNA. But just like epigenetics, where you can actually start to change the way your genomes express themselves by different dietary restrictions, different things you add to your diet, take away, different exercises, you can actually change how your DNA expresses itself through the genome process. You can actually change that. Well, we can actually do the same with our behaviors. As a matter of fact, in about 30 minutes, I have a conversation with Hugh Massie on this very thing to try to discover my actual true giftings and my personal who I am, to be able to better leverage the things that I have as gifts to achieve the goals that I want to, but also to try to improve upon those things that I'm lacking that might be hindering goals that I want to achieve. So I wanted to bring you just a little bit of a snippet, if you haven't seen this, of my conversation with Hugh Massie. I hope you'll listen to the entire conversation. It's on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can actually watch the conversation here on the YouTube channel. But anyway, here is a little piece of my conversation with Hugh Massie. We know it instinctively because we work on our identity, but there a lot of people hearing this, they're going to think, well, I am my name, or I am. The closest they could get maybe is I am a lawyer. That's my identity. And that's an element of their identity.
Yeah.
And I know that I would imagine that your analysis of trying to help someone figure out their identity so that you can then take that as part of how it's going to help their financial plan, their future financially and in their wealth building, is got to be quite extensive. But just kind of as detailed as you want to get, I'll take as much time as you'll allow. How do you help that person that comes in and says, Hugh, I don't know who I am. What are some of those probing questions to help them start to get to a point where, beyond their name, where they're from, their parents, their spouse, their job, things they like, can they start digging into matching that identity in such a way with their true dreams, desires, ambitions, to where now those can work in sync to have impact?
That is the key step that needs to be taken. And I would say that for people that are wanting, for example, financial planning help or career help, doing something that's major in that respect, or they're about to retire, that you shouldn't make any decision until you have this clear. And if it takes you 6 months or a year to sort it out, do so. I think that, for example, there are people out there, Jason, that you and I will probably both know, that have sold businesses or had some major, windfall somewhere, or an inheritance, or whatever it is, or even an event that's gone wrong on the other side of their life. It's something negative. and they're suddenly into something else, or they've made some big choice. That is the wrong thing to do. You, in a way, want to give yourself time. And the way I express identity is that you are not a human doing, you're a human being. And what is your place of being? And that story has been building all of your life. You may not know it. The fact that, that you might have lived at a certain suburb, done certain activities. Your original career was as an accountant or whatever. Sorry. That is sort of the doing part that you're referring to. Okay. But then, and what I get people to do is this in 3 segments: is to block it, is to write down all of the sort of the doing stuff for, say, the first 20 to 25 years of their life. Put all that down in one column. Then the next column is, okay, where's that evolved to? Okay. I was an accountant. I was a lifeguard. Played golf, went, all boys boarding school, lived in X suburb. I'm Australian. Next middle part, I'm now living in America. I'm an entrepreneur. Running X businesses, designing, doing ABCD. That's starting. I'm on the board of X. It's getting closer to the being, but then the last part starts to become a lot more of the why, reflecting my X factor, how I'm impacting people, and really how do I show up as a human being? And, people come to me, for wisdom. I think would be one of the reasons people come to me. I'm very good at architecting behavioral solutions that solve a business problem. I've learned to look at every business problem or life problem has got a behavioral connection. And with that is a money issue and stress. And so through that lens, I design, whether it's a plan for a business, technology platform. So we built, more than 100 apps that sort of address that in varying settings, or just coaching someone to make a quantum leap. But it comes from that greater place of being. And mine is still evolving too. It's an evolution.
Hugh is a great guy, and I'm really looking forward to visiting with him today, because here's the thing. So, I've had some success as an entrepreneur and just in different areas of life, but I think we're always in that state of being wherever we are. And so I want to figure out how, here as I am as a being, and not just a human doing, but a human being, I want to be in the place with the tools where I can achieve as absolutely much impact as possible on my community, on my family, on my finances, all of it, my faith. I want to be prepared and be where I'm supposed to be. And the only way I think that we can know where we're going is to know where we are to start with. And that's why I'm really looking forward to this. And he and I covered a little bit of James Clear's Atomic Habits. And one of my favorite parts of that book that I recommend to anybody who wants to truly start a understanding behavioral science at a very high level. Essentially, Atomic Habits is BJ Fogg's work in a very digestible book. Now, you can also read BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits, which is his own book about his research and what he's discovered, and it's fantastic. I've read both multiple times. But one of my favorite parts of Atomic Habits is this idea of identity-based habits. When you start to understand not only who you want to be, but who you are, and the changes you need to make with who you are to ultimately reach as close to possible of being that avatar that you've designed for yourself. Like for me, it's to be an incredibly loving and honoring husband. It's to be an exceptional father, that my daughters always know that they have stability and they have someone that is there to give them wisdom. And I want to be that. I want to be healthy. I want to make sure that I practice what I preach on this podcast about improving always in all ways. And a big part of that is my health and my wellness, watching what I eat, not drinking alcohol, not smoking, not doing all these, not because that doesn't fit with the identity that I have taken on for myself. And it's not just something that I want to project to the world. It's something that I truly want to be that person. It's being whenever I decide I want my identity to be tied to, I'm a Christian, so I want it to be tied to Jesus Christ. Well, guess what? That's going to really determine a lot of my behaviors as it relates to having that identity. That means that I'm going to try to be more forgiving and offer more grace and not be as reactive and fail miserably all the time in all these topics, except for the not drinking. I don't drink any alcohol anymore, so I got that one down. But as my daughters would tell you, is your dad the perfect dad? They may say that, but I guarantee if you press them hard, if they say, well, but he's also got this that he probably should work on. Same thing with Jim Lynch. She said, I love my husband. He is honoring and all these things, but there's these little things he can work on. We're all evolving toward that person that we want to be, but you got to figure out who the heck that is. Who is the person that you are? And what is the delta between who you are and that identity versus the identity that you want to assume for yourself to be the absolute best version of yourself? Hugh does a great job of giving some insight on some tools and tactics that you can deploy for that. So, well, I hope you enjoyed. That's it. So we've got a little bit of economics, we've got some health and wellness, and we've got some behavioral science in there. I hope you found this beneficial. Please leave some comments to get the algorithms going. I'm trying to build the channel up. Look, I'm not that great at this. I don't pretend to be, but I'm going to do my best to try to bring you good information and good data that I think that you can find useful in your everyday life. Please consider listening to The Jason Wright Show, my podcast. I've had it for 6 years and the downloads are just continue to increase. It's so honoring. And I give all the credit to my amazing guests that come on. Usually the format of the show is a long form interview every Tuesday. And then I'll probably publish something like this kind of in between. It might just be a little single monologue about something that I found interesting that I want to bring to the audience. And then on Fridays, I generally do an Authentic Health Fridays with my business partner, Dr. Gus Vickery, talking about health, nutrition, longevity, all these different things, the science of longevity that we love to dig into. So please support the channel, listen to that. And then until we meet again, always endeavor, no matter who you are, where you are, no matter how old, how young, it's never too late to take on the goal to improve. Always in all ways. I'm Jason and I'm out. Thank you so much for listening.